Hey guys, welcome back to Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel for the video today. And guys, got a little fun video today, just sort of relaxing story time. I'm going to talk about the biggest wave I have ever been in my bass boat. You probably won't believe me when I tell you, but I have been in a lot of big water over the past 45, 50 years in a boat, coast to coast. So I've got a couple situations I'm going to tell you guys about, just to relate to you guys what's out there and what a bass boat can actually handle. I think you guys might find this video interesting, so we'll dig into that here in today's episode. I've also, guys, got a couple quick housekeeping tips to get started here, to keep the lights on in the tackle room. Just wanted to remind you guys, football season is about upon us, and when I think about football season, guys, I think about summer sausage and like Ritz crackers. If you guys want to try the best summer sausage you have ever tasted, try the Bridgeford summer sausage. They got both the jalapeno and regular. You can get it at about any Walmart grocery store in the country. Guys, the quality, the attention to detail, the old world recipe that they use to make this summer sausage, second to none. And again, guys, you will never find another company like Bridgeford Foods that supports bass fishing and everything that's great about this sport. They're just an awesome freaking company. And also, guys, I wanted to let you all know, Cast King has got the Red Demon elite spinning reel here. This is the world's fastest retrieve spinning reel. It's got a 7.4 to 1 gear ratio. There's not another spinning reel in the market that has this faster retrieve. This is an excellent reel when you need to take up a lot of slack with your spinning rod fishing. So I like it for, like, you know, shaky head fishing, Ned rig fishing, wacky rig fishing, where, you know, you make your cast out there like that and you work it, and then you want to get it in to make another cast. You can get it in and just burn it back in there. So I'll have the Speed Demon Elite linked in my tackle warehouse, or excuse me, in my Cast King link in the description of this video. I'll just have the Cast King link. Go to the spinning reels. You can get the Speed Demon Elite there. And if you use my promo code, guys, Randy10, you get an additional 10% discount off on this reel. So I think you guys will really like it. And I'd suggest the 3000 series spool, which is really good, holds a lot of line, and makes some really long casts with that. Okay. Let's get into the story time here. You know, one of the things about it before I get into this, I got to tell you guys, one of the oddball things about me as a fisherman is I love the feeling of being in big water, big waves, giant waves, rough waves in a bass boat. There's something about that if you've never done it before, it just makes you feel alive. And most people have never been in what I consider rough water or big waves. They think they have, but they haven't. When I hear people talking about, you know, oh, such and such lake can get really rough, or say, for example, I'll hear guys talking about, well, Table Rock can get really rough, or Grand Lake can get really rough, or such and such lake can get really rough. Guys, most lakes cannot get that rough just because they're laid out. There are a few bodies of water in this country that the way they are geographically laid out and the depth of the water and all that stuff, they can get unbelievably rough and unbelievable treacherous. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the biggest waves I've ever been in a bass boat, and, you know, sort of go through the biggest ones and the most dangerous ones. Because one thing about a big wave is there's a big difference between a giant wave and a big wave, and I'm talking about in a bass boat, and a dangerous wave. Because a lot of times the biggest waves are not the most dangerous waves. The thing that creates danger in a wave is the distance between the waves. A wave that has a lot of distance between the waves is a pretty safe wave to run, even if it's a big one. But a wave that is tight and really, really stacked close together, those waves don't have to be as big, and they can be more dangerous than a giant wave. So let's talk a little bit about some of the giant water I've been in. Okay, right off the bat, let me talk about the biggest wave I've ever been in a bass boat. And I'm going to talk about some dangerous stuff. I was at a tournament at Lake Champlain, an FLW tournament. And after the tournament, I was driving back home. And on the way home, I stopped in Erie, Pennsylvania to spend the night, right on the shores of Lake Erie. It was about probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something, and it was super windy. The wind was blowing like 45 miles an hour, just hauling, super strong winds, and, you know, blowing my truck and boat around. So I said, I'm just going to pull over here and, you know, get a room for the night. So anyway, I pulled over there, and the place where I'm staying was right on Lake Erie there. And I looked out in Lake Erie, and the flags are just like straight out. They're just standing stiff. And I got a wild hair, and it's like, okay, I just want to see what it's like. You know, I've been on Lake Erie. I'll tell you some more stories about Lake Erie, but I've fished a half a dozen tournaments on Lake Erie before this even happened. So I've been on Lake Erie in big water and, you know, in big waves. I've been on Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, Lake Huron, St. Clair, all the Great Lakes out there. But I have never seen the wind blowing like this on a Great Lake. Again, it was, you know, wind gusts were expected to be up to 50 miles an hour. So I launched my bass boat in the harbor there, and I just said, I'm just gonna pick my way out there and just see what it's like. So I started out, and it wasn't too bad when I got outside of the harbor. I ran out there about probably, I'm gonna guess, maybe a mile out offshore, and they slowly started getting bigger and bigger. When I first started out there, like the first quarter mile, the first half mile out there, they were rolling, but they were probably, you know, 4-footers or something like that. And got a chicken making a bunch of, that chicken acted like something was after it there. So I got about a half mile out there, and they're starting to build up a little bit, and then building a little bit more. And I guess I reached a place where the water got deeper, and all of a sudden they started stacking up big, like really, really quick. So these waves, the thing about them is they were really, really wide apart. So I went from about a 4-foot wave, 5-foot wave, 6-foot wave, 7-foot wave, and I'm going sideways with them. I'm not going with them or into them. I'm trying to skirt the troughs, and that's how you run a giant wave. And they were wide enough apart where I was literally just like surfing over them. And I was running like 30 miles an hour. It's like they were wide enough apart I could still run about 30 miles an hour. And I was in probably 6 to 7 foot or something like that. And I know how the best way that I can judge a wave is when I'm at the bottom of the wave. I was in a 20-foot boat at the time. I was in a 20-foot Ranger. So I'm judging these wave heights from the length of my boat at the base of them. So when I'm at the bottom of the trough, I can look over to my left because the big waves were coming over on my left side, and I could just estimate the height of the wave based upon, you know, looking up above me, how high it was above me when I was at the bottom versus my boat. So I'm getting out there, and I'm starting to get into these 8-footers. And then I get out there about another quarter mile, and they started getting big really quick. And they started, for the first time, they started white capping a little bit over the top of them, which I didn't want any part of because it gets real dangerous when they start peaking. But when I turned around, guys, the last probably 100 yards I went, I was literally in waves that I think were about 12 foot tall. Now that's based upon being at the bottom of the trough, looking up in a 45 mile an hour wind coming out of the west. And they were freaking massive. And you talk about something that makes you feel small. When you're in a 20-foot bass boat in the middle of Lake Erie and there's 12-foot waves coming in, it made you feel alive. It made my senses were heightened so much. And I turned around. It's like I was coming up this one big one, and I got almost to the crest of it, and that's when it started white capping over the top of it. And I said, I'm turning around. I'm not gonna. I don't want to push my luck. So I turned around and ran back in. That was the experience I'll never forget in my life. It was like, a lot of people say, well, that's stupid, Randy. Why would you want to put yourself in danger? I never felt I was in danger whatsoever. One of the things about running rough water is you got to know your limitations. You got to know your equipment. You have to know your confidence level and your skill as a boat driver. I do not use a hot foot. You never want to use a hot foot in a bass boat, guys. I've talked about this before, especially in rough water. The whole time I was running out there, I had my left knee on the seat. I had one foot on the floor. So I was riding on my right leg. My right leg was sitting on the seat. That's how you run rough water. I'll argue that with anybody, guys, because I've been in more rough water than 99% of the people watching this video. Some guys that live on Lake Erie, yeah, you've probably been in rough more than I have, but that was a great experience. Now, the other times I've been on Erie and Ontario and Huron, I've been in several situations out there running from Clayton, New York, the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, out to like Shimo Bay and Henderson Harbor. And there was legitimate, 8 maybe 10 footers out there, a little bit tighter together than those Erie ones were. And I've been in several situations on Erie where I launched at the mouth of the Detroit River and ran out to Pelee Islands running with, 8 footers, that type of stuff. But that day that I was out there in the 45-mile-an-hour winds sustained, those were epic waves that I'll never forget in my life. Okay, so a couple other, let me give you some other honorable mentions. Obviously, the Great Lakes is where you're going to get the biggest waves. And some other lakes that get really rough is Lake Mead will get really rough. I've seen some big waves like on Sam Rayburn Lake. There's nothing really stands out to me besides, Mead and Sam Rayburn as some smaller lakes that get really stacked, big waves, but they're a little bit tighter together. But the most dangerous wave I have ever been in, which is, I don't even consider the 12-footer at Erie being dangerous. I was fishing an FLW tournament at Lake Murray in South Carolina, which you would never think to be that dangerous of a lake. And I was fishing on the east side of the lake. It was the first or second morning of practice. And back then, this was back before we had cell phones or anything, so I didn't have a cell phone. This was like prior to cell phones. And I'd seen the weather forecast. We were supposed to get, like a front coming in, but it was about 9:30 in the morning, and I wanted to run across the other side of the lake, and it was starting to get windy. There was like 30-mile-an-hour winds out of the north winds out of 30, which that's not a big deal. I mean, I can handle a 30-mile-an-hour wind. It's rough, but if you pick your way through it, it's doable. So I got out there and I started running from this eastern side of Lake Murray, and I was going to run right across over there to the western side and fish for the afternoon. Guys, I got out there probably about a quarter of a way out to the middle of the lake, and all of a sudden this straight line wind picked up just like that, and I'm guessing it was blowing 60. It was the windiest I have ever seen on a lake. I've never seen that type of a straight line wind on a lake. It came up like that, and it's like almost immediately the lake turned violent. I'm talking super violent, and I have never seen, like, I'm talking about in a matter of a minute or 2 minutes at the most. I'm in the middle of Murray. In about a 2-minute period, these waves grew to about 6 feet tall, and they were the tightest waves I have ever seen. They were stacked so tight, and every single one of them was breaking over on the top. And I got it in the middle of that thing, and I have never been so concerned about my safety as I was at that time, because these waves were breaking over into my boat. So I turned it around to try to go with them, because there was a couple islands about a quarter of a mile, maybe a half mile from where I was. So I turned the boat, and I was getting freaking just clobbered by these waves coming over the top of me. And it was just like, the wind is just like howling, and I feel like the wind almost was picking the boat up. It was so windy. I finally got the boat turned around, and I'm like just surfing these waves in, and I got on the back side of the island. I sat there, guys, for probably 5 hours. I got out of the wind on the back side of the island where the wind wasn't blowing, got out on the bank there out of the wind, and I sat there for 5 hours because that wind never let up. And finally it let up to about probably 45 or 50 miles an hour. And by that time it was late in the afternoon, and I basically idled with the waves back to the trailer there to get on there and put it on. I have never seen anything like that. That was absolutely the most dangerous situation I have ever been in a bass boat, including all of the big waters I've been in, the big lakes across the country. So anyway, guys, rough water is something you need to take seriously, and I don't recommend you being in rough water unless you know what you're doing and you've got confidence and you know what your limitations of yourself and your equipment are, and you can read water and you understand how to tack water and everything that goes with it, because it's not nothing to mess around with if you don't have confidence in your abilities. But like I said, I've been driving a bass boat for 50 years, and I've never lost anybody yet, knock on wood. So just wanted to share that story with you guys. Hope you're well.